Hello everyone, my name is Matt and welcome to tonight's live stream. Thank you all for being with us. Tonight, extra special night, I am joined by not one but two of AIE's most beautiful staff members and family. I'm joined here by Selena Lee from Sydney, so welcome Selena.
Hello everyone again. It's been another week, another live stream. Hope you're all excited.
Absolutely. And we're also joined by Myles here as well from AIE Sydney. He is our games design teacher, joined us in February. So thank you, Myles.
Thank you.
Awesome. So tonight we are all going to be hearing about Myles' experience within browser games, mobile games. He is an industry vet, and we are very lucky to have him here at AIE be a teacher of ours. So I can't wait to get stuck into it. But before we do jump into the questions from Sel, I'll just quickly say to all our lovely viewers out there, if you have any questions tonight, please do feel free to pop them in our chat. We will do our best to get them answered. And for anyone who wants to know more, Myles is an expert. Ask him. But other than that, guys,
I'll try.
Challenge him. I like challenging questions. So other than that, but enjoy the stream. And Sel, I'll pass over to you and Myles.
All right, thank you, Matt, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. So let us all get started. Myles, why don't you introduce yourself for those in the audience who don't know what you are, or who you are, or what you do, and maybe give a bit of a rundown on your work experience in the industry.
Yeah. So I guess I'm a game designer. I do have experience with programming, so I like to think of myself as as a technical game designer. But generally, I guess I started when I was like 14, just doing Flash games. And I actually had to comb through earlier today, and I found a bunch of those old Flash games that I was combing Newgrounds for, and I ended up downloading them just to look back, and you just realize how far you go after working in the industry for so long. And so I started really there just doing my own small games. Then I thought I should maybe study it, and I thought that might be a good idea just because I enjoyed doing it so much. And so I ended up doing a diploma at the Academy of Information Technology in multimedia, and that really allowed me to. What it really gave me was the time to just hone my portfolio and build a bunch of projects that I could then show off as portfolio items. So I did that for about a year, ended up finishing at the top there, and so moved into uni. And after university, I thought, why not try code? Because I really liked code. I was doing it anyway, so why not get some formal training in it? And I actually studied at AIE. For a year. I did the diploma course in C++, so it was really hard and I had to kind of get through it all, but I got through and I learned a lot about code, and it kind of helped me get my start in industry, which was pretty much KMN games. And then from there it was just moving around, just doing a bunch of things in web, mobile. It did help with the AAA stuff over at KMN on a couple of the IPs that they were doing at the time. And then finally into kind of casinos. But I did start off as teaching actually before I actually got my first, stint. And so it kind of feels good to be back doing that stuff. So yeah. So
yeah, and we're totally happy. Yeah, we're totally happy to have you back here. Fun fact for everyone, Myles is here in Sydney with me. So you started all the way back in when you were 14. What kind of sparked your interest in getting into the industry? And I can see you did like a multimedia course, and you also did a programming course with AIE. So where did game design come to play? What got you into that?
At the time, there wasn't any other courses there wasn't a course for game design. So really we had multimedia as an option, computer science and those types of things. I believe even at the time, art really wasn't even a thing that they really taught. So for me, I guess it all started really young because my dad we had the Commodore 64, and during those times too, it was the times of like Commodore, the NES came out, and I was playing games like Mario and Zelda and things like Sonic. and it was captivating to me. It was something about the mechanics of the game, but I was actually really big into film, and I watched a lot of movies. My dad was really big into film, and so for me, it still wasn't at the level that film was at in terms of like an experiential narrative. And it wasn't only until I got my PlayStation, the original PlayStation, and the first few games I got was the first was Metal Gear Solid, which was a big one for me. And on my PC at the time, I remember getting a copy. I remember this. My dad used to sell laser discs back in the day, and he had this one customer that used to come around, and he'd open up his boot and have all of these games in there. And my dad would just say, "Oh, pick a game," and so I'm like, "Okay, I'll pick one." And I still remember choosing this box, and it had 3 games in one. And I'm like, "Whoa, cool, really cool collection." So I'm like, "All right, there's 3 games in one. Why not pick that up?" And it had on the cover of it, it had the Lucasfilms collection, and it came with Monkey Island. It came with Day the Tentacle, and I really like some really classic adventure games. And when I played those, it kind of showed me that story could be in games and what story could do in games. And from there, I just fell in love with the idea of making my own interactive stories that people could actually experience and not just have to sit back and watch. And I guess that sparked my interest in game design. And then from there, it was trying to figure out, how do I actually do this? And so I played with things like RPG Maker when I was around maybe 12, 13 for a couple of years, then jumped into Flash and ActionScript 2, and started to build my own games by coding.
Yeah, so you're a game designer, and I believe you're still developing some cool indie games when you're not teaching our budding designers here at AIE. So what is exactly a game designer? And you did mention there wasn't a game design course back in the day. So what does a game designer do, and what part do they play in this whole process? Were there always game designers in the industry, even back in the day?
Yeah, I think it started off as a programmer. So even like Miyamoto coded his own stuff to begin with. Hideo Kojima was programming Metal Gear Solid and the original MX over in Japan for a while, and so back then it was different because it wasn't such a large industry, and it wasn't very specialized because no one really knew what to do yet or how you would kind of break down the roles involved in making a game. And so that wave of kind of indie development where it was one guy making something, that's kind of how it was. And it was only until kind of the comeback after the 80s, after, E.T. Flunked and like the industry almost died out, it came back and you saw this resurgence in like console games. And that's where the team started to get a little bit bigger. Definitely on like the PC side of things, where you had like Sierra coming up and LucasArts Films, where they started to introduce the idea of like game designers that are the architects of the project. You can almost think of it as the architect of a house. They write up the blueprint and the builders actually go and build it. It's the same thing. The game designer will architect the design of the game, and the programmers, artists, and audio guys will go and build it for you.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. So it's relatively recent then compared to roles like programmers and artists. And you yourself, you came from a programming background. And I'm sure a lot of people in the audience, especially those interested in game design, might be wondering, how important is programming and skills in art as well when it comes to being a designer? Do you have to be a pro coder to be a good designer, or do you only need to know the basics?
No, so when I talk about Kojima and Miyamoto coding their own stuff and not really knowing, like there wasn't really a game designer, I mean that in the sense of video games. Before that, you had D&D, you had tabletop, game designers existed, but it was only for like on page. And traditionally, these people didn't really have coding backgrounds or anything like that, or art backgrounds. They just really were good with rule sets. They could write up really good rules, really good mechanics, interactions. And then they would give that out to people to go ahead and play and see how those tabletop scenarios and campaigns actually played out. And then it moved into the digital format. And I still think I'm a very old school kind of designer. It's because I think I attribute it to the fact that I kind of grew up in that time where like the mid 90s to like the early 2000s, where we had this really crazy change in the industry where everything went from 2D to 3D. We had the likes of like Halo and bringing some of these core PC genres over to console. And there was just a huge paradigm shift, and I got to see all of that. And for me, what was still true of that game development back then was it was still very garage. And it just allows for quick iteration. It allows you to continue to test things. And so for me, being able to do that as a designer is really important. I think programming is really important because it allows you to prototype ideas. It allows you to test them out. It makes my job easier. Whenever the boss in some of the other studios would say, okay, you've got an idea for a mechanic, how's it going to work? I would just go, okay, well, let me show you. And I would show them with a prototype. I didn't have to write any more descriptions or anything like that. It just made it easy for me to kind of explain the idea that I wanted to have for the game. And so I think programming is still one of those things where it's an important skill to have. I know that my first gig at KMM, I was working with he was previously the technical director over at Quantic Dream, and he did the engine for Heavy Rain. And before Heavy Rain, he worked on the engine for Fahrenheit, which was the second game that Quantic Dream did at the time. And me and him got really close. I still speak to him today, and he's still doing his thing. But one of the things was that none of the other designers really had a code background, and so I was the gap between what he was doing and what the designers had to do. And so I would come up with tool specifications. We need a level editor. This is how it should work. We needed to have an event system. I would specify how it should work, and he would go and build and we would iterate. And once it was ready, give that to the designers. And that really being able to create the tools or craft the tools and help build that stuff to allow the stuff we wanted to design to happen in the game. That was a really powerful thing to really see that how much tools can really help you bring a vision to life. And so I think having that technical ability is really good. Having said that, though, knowing art can also be very important. Like if you can't create a prototype, nothing's idea better than doing a really great concept piece or doing like a screenshot mock-up and showing that off and seeing if it has legs and people are interested just in the visual style of the game. I remember reading design documents where the designers had artistic ability, and the design document would be this like a comic book. It was just really nice to read. Everyone actually read the design documents because it was just really flashy with all the art. So you kind of need both. I think the biggest advice I could give is that you don't need to be the best at both of them, but if you understand how both work and you understand the fundamentals of each, it makes you a better designer because you're not going to overscope anything. You know that you can't add all these mechanics because you know how hard it is to actually implement with code. You're not going to go in and try and figure out an art style that's not going to really work because there's just not enough time to produce all the assets because you understand the fundamentals of art too. So I think understanding all the disciplines was the key of, I guess in my experience, it was a key in my success at being a game designer because I kind of did everything I had to when I was in high school, and it gave me a good idea on how each one of those disciplines worked. And then it allowed me to really figure out that, hey, you know what, I actually just like designing the games. So it really made me sure about what I wanted to do moving forward.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I believe, like, to reiterate what you said, it's very important to have those skills in programming and art, but you don't have to be like super good at it. You should leave that job to the actual programmers and artists. But certainly any kind of skill you can pick up, maybe even things like sound design, you can probably use as a designer when you're making your prototypes as well. So I think that's some really important knowledge for everyone watching there. So we have some of your projects here on the screen. We're just bringing out some of your projects, both AAA and your indie work. You've worked on so many projects. What have been your favorite to work on so far, and why?
Oh, there's been a lot. I think during my time at KMM Games, we were developing a mobile game, and it was at the time that mobile was kind of exploding, and they were building the AAA studio with us, and so we would get builds from like Avalanche on Mad Max, and we'd have to test it and give feedback on it, and happy feet. And during that process, our small little team was developing a mobile game. And it was this, I was working with Corey Barlog at the time, who was as everyone knows, is the creative director on God of War. He was creative director on God of War 2, and he just released God of War, the one that just came out on PS4, which is an amazing game. And I learned a lot from him about just level design, the old mentality of like trying to beat the player, which is how the arcade game designers used to think, because they wanted you to keep putting money in the arcade machines. And it's how I designed, but it wasn't until like Corey said to me, like, it's now an experience that you have to kind of make it easy for players to be able to get through and understand the mechanics and learn the game. And so working on that project and working on this really new idea where you could grow and shrink and change the scale of your character just by eating food, but the way that you ate the food prevented you from reaching certain areas. It was really something that we pulled from like Cut the Rope at the time. And we took just from some of the bigger games that were at the time, but it was just mainly the learning experience from just learning from all of these like talented people in the industry.
Yeah, awesome. And we also see some of your work for Royal Winds here on the screen as well. It's definitely interesting seeing how game design comes into play a lot, even in the casino industry. So. Do you have some fun facts for us? What are some kind of other industries that you as a game designer can get into that the normal person might not know of?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's definitely one of them. I think for me, this was such a learning experience for me, but also just very difficult during this time, just because what we were trying to do with this game, and I talk about the KMM game being very, very important to me because I learned a lot from Corey, but this is where I was like lead for the first time. So I came on board as a game designer. I moved up into lead design and then eventually into creative direction and writing. And so this was really the first like baby of mine in this game, because I concepted out from the beginning, and it was like we had the idea of a Western, set in the Old West, and you had saloon games, and we just found that it didn't scale well with the idea of being able to add a lot of different mini games. But the hardest part of that game was that we were taking the idea of being able to bet with real money and pay out in real money, but based on it. So imagine Candy Crush, where you could bet on your skill and win real money. It was that idea. But what people don't realize is that with slots and casino games, there is a formula that ensures that the house wins. And it's really hard to do if it's a skill game, because you can't guarantee the player is not going to lose. And so it was a very interesting challenge trying to figure out a way to do that. And so we played with like difficulty scaling, making the game harder as you got better and things like that. So even though I thought initially coming into it like a casino game, we're still trying to do something very interesting in terms of bringing like esports to a mainstream market, bringing it onto mobile. And I think those guys are still chugging along now too. I think they're going all right. So that was a very interesting kind of thing. But it just shows that you can't just go straight for the first thing that comes to your head, like AAA, mobile, all of these things. Like there are other opportunities here to make games, in casinos, in virtual worlds, in gamification. So there's a lot of different areas you could potentially go in as a game designer. Gamification is a really cool one too. That's happening right now, especially with VR. You're essentially taking training, like training a nurse, gamifying it, and doing it all in VR. And even something like that is a very interesting project to work on.
Yeah, that's some really helpful advice, especially maybe for our current students as well. And so let's talk a little bit about your teaching career now. So you mentioned that you've been teaching for quite a while now. So what made you want to teach rather than just, have a consistent career in the industry? And also for as a fun fact for us, what's the most important thing that a designer should know? So what's the first thing that you teach your students when they first attend your game design class?
The first thing I say to my students is that moral or theme, or the moral argument. I actually call it the moral argument. I just don't want to use words that maybe some might not understand. But the moral argument is really the moral of your story. And I say to my students that without this, the game really has no soul. And so they need to understand that part of the designer's job is to put a moral into the game and use all the techniques available in the book to help portray that moral in the game. So it's like learning the moral of a story. When you play a game, you learn the moral of that game, what that game is trying to teach you. And so that's the first thing I really say to my designers, is that you need to have something to say if you're a game designer. And most of them will tell me that, and I say, does anyone here not have anything to say? And I never see a hand being raised, because if you're a game designer, you always have something to say. You're not just making games for the sake of it. You might initially, but that's because you haven't found your voice yet. But once you do, that's really what it is. It's the messages you believe in that you want to go ahead and teach.
So that's super awesome. And what
Yeah,
got
I
you
guess-
into teaching?
I guess to follow up with that, what got me into teaching and not want to pursue games still? I still love games, and I'm still going to pursue games. It's one of those things where I just can't get away from it. It's something that I grew up with. It's something I did, as a kid. Sometimes I joke with my friends that, I came out of the womb holding a controller because I was playing, Street Fighter and stuff, already with the controller at the age of like 3. So it was something that I started off with at a very young age. But for me, I've done kind of all of that stuff already. I worked in AAA, I worked in mobile, I worked in casinos, and I think I'm just at a point in my life now that I don't want to make games for anyone else anymore. I just want to make them for me. And so I've gone indie, I've gone solo dev, because I can program. My art skills are now improving. I've been practicing as well. So I'm at a point now where I just want to make my own stuff and use the learnings of that to teach the students to then go ahead and make things like Cyberpunk. And I'll play all their games. I'm cool with that.
Nice. I have a bit of a personal question. We don't have a viewer question yet, so I'm going to ask a personal question. Now, Myles, this could be a controversial answer, but you were just talking about how you came out of the womb holding a controller, and you were talking about your games. What is your favourite game you've ever played?
My favorite game of all time is Metal Gear Solid. It's always between that or Monkey Island, the original Monkey Island, because the reason why is when I first played them, I really understood what games could actually be in the next generation of titles, and it's really where it went with after around 95 and past that point, it just became this story-driven kind of media. And it really was those two games that really sold me on that idea.
Yeah. Cool. Do you find I come from an events background, and so working with events the whole time, I found actually now go to an event as a participant, I actually see myself staring around thinking about how they've organized the event, and it kind of takes away a little bit from do you as a game developer play a game and you're kind of thinking and it takes away from the game? Do you find yourself in that mindset?
Yeah, all the time. It's the curse. It's the game designer. I call it game designer's curse, but it's anyone that now knows the secret behind it. It's the same thing with storytelling. So I do screenwriting as well, and anytime I watch a film, I can already see the formula of their story. I know there's going to be an inciting incident at the 15-minute mark. I know at the midpoint there's going to be something else that happens. So I just know it, and it ruins kind of the experience for me. But what I've actually ended up doing, so this is a little trick for anyone that's having this issue as well, is meditation can actually help with that. It allows you to separate the analytical mind, the right side from the left side from the right side. And so when you're playing the game, you're purely experiencing it for what it is, and your analytical brain is not jumping in and disrupting you. But it took me at least 3 years to continually practice this to kind of allow me to separate that. So if you do a quick search on that, being too analytical when analyzing interactive media, there'll be things on meditation and things like that to kind of help with that. But it's really about trying to separate the two mindsets and trying to figure out the easiest way to do that. So.
Have you tied? That's a really interesting point, which was meditation. I hadn't thought about that in terms of a playing sense, never before. But I definitely, myself, I do yoga, so I know that when you're in that mindset and you come out of it, you do experience things differently. Absolutely. Have you ever tried to approach making a game, but meditating beforehand, and so you can approach the game dev side from a different side of mindset rather than the analytical one?
Yeah. There was yeah. So even with this game, I'll meditate and I'll go into like not like a full on trance, but what it does is when I get into a like a trance like state, all it does is, so I had two options at the time, and this all stemmed from like Einstein and stuff before, being able to lucid dream, and it was just something that I was trying to do, but it was taking me a little bit to really get the hang of it, and I did get to the point of being able to figure out that I was in a dream and things like that, and so I was doing that for a little bit, but then realized that it was really just being in that dream state. I could prototype ideas in my mind and vividly see it. Because what was happening is I would come up with, let's say, a vision for a game design doc, and I would see bits and pieces of the game, but not everything. Yeah. And so instead of having to go in and program everything or prototype stuff to test it out, what if I could just dream it up? And so I started being really interested in kind of meditation and stuff. And so even this new game that I'm working on, it kind of started from Game Jam, took it from Game Jam, and thought up something in my head, and then I started to prototype it after that.
Cool. That's I love that. that is a very unique and new experience that I've heard from, and I absolutely love it. Like, for those of you out there who haven't tried meditation before, I absolutely recommend it. It is
definitely
excellent. Back to you, Sal. I do apologize, kind of hijacked that for a second.
No, that's okay. The more you know, honestly, the more you know, and I'm sure like most people out there probably haven't like considered meditation as a part of helping you develop like cool games, or even to enjoy your favorite games, maybe in a different way. So that's some really awesome advice. And speaking of awesome advice, you were an AIE alumni yourself. You did a programming course with us. So do you still remember your experience here at AIE? What was it like? Like, how did you like your teachers, your cohort? What was the overall experience?
Yeah, so I still remember it quite well, actually. I was older at the time, so I had already studied at AIT, and I was already doing game design as a contractor and doing things online, but not full time. Excuse me. And it was at this time where I was, I think, around about 21-ish, maybe even a little bit younger, where I decided to go into programming and go to AIE and learn that stuff. And at the time I was the oldest in the class, and so there were a few students in the cohort that I got along really well with, and they were like really into programming, and these guys are just really crazy. And I think one of them is Aiden, who's now works for the guys that do World of Tanks. They're just across the road from us. I think it's Aiden Bonner, I think his name is that. And he was a really good programmer at the time, and I remember I believe it was Simon Bora, who's also a very good programmer. He went into mining and did a really good job there. And so really what it allowed me to do was I had these other students that were really passionate about it, where I thought I was the most passionate person about it. And so we all kind of leaned on each other to get better. And I still remember some of the projects that we learned there. But this was at a time that I kind of miss a little bit because this was a time of really hardcore C++ stuff. At the time, I believe it was Conan was the programming teacher. And he just had a wealth of knowledge on like engine design and things like that. And so I really wanted to make my own game engine, my own editors and tools. And so that year I really spent that time understanding how to stitch APIs together and build just a bunch of games. And so for me, what it really allowed me to do was take my learning to the next level, because AIT was really using like Virtuals at the time, which is like one of the, I don't know if anyone even remembers Virtuals, but it was way before like Unreal Engine and before Unity. It was like one of the first game engines or editors. And it was all visual scripting or visual coding, kind of like Blueprint in Unreal is today. But it was like that. And so really like hands-on code and stuff, that really wasn't something taught anywhere. And so when I jumped over into AIE, that's what I really experienced, like, wow, this is what it's like to code. And that's when I really fell in love with the idea of being a proper developer.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess that's just what happens when you put a bunch of really bright and passionate people in one room. You get to make some really cool things and end up going to all sorts of places. So hopefully you guys will have a reunion and just talk about all those years in the industry as well.
Yeah, it would be really cool.
Yeah. So as we're approaching the end of our live stream, just one final question. So you do a lot of interviews for future applicants for AIE. So you've interviewed a lot of game designers. So if I'm a budding game designer and I want to apply for the game design course at AIE, what would you want to see in my portfolio? What are some of the cool things I can put in there and get in?
To be honest with you, I'll be straight. Show me games. I just want to see games. Doesn't have to be a video game. Doesn't have to be a game design document. It can even be just like a board game that you've made on paper. It can even be a D&D campaign that you are currently running with your group. So it doesn't have to be a digital video game, but it should be an interactive experience that I'm seeing, because I want to see. This is probably the biggest bit of advice that I can give to anyone. When I first started, I would start things but not finish them. And so what I had was just a bunch of just mechanics, but no games. And I didn't get a job for a while because of that, actually. For the first couple of years, during my time like teaching and stuff, this is when I learned that, you actually need to make stuff. And so that's when I started actually finishing games. And so for anyone that wants to be a game designer, you just need to have an idea, make it, and test it and see if it works. Whether that be even if that's just a D&D campaign that you had an idea for, you've crafted the campaign, and you're currently taking people through that campaign, you're still showing that you can create something and and actually finish it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that awesome advice. Everyone, please listen up. So if you want to become a game designer here at AIE and you want to apply, just make a game. I'm sure Myles don't want you to make the next Metal Gear Solid or anything like that in your application. He would love to see it.
It wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't hurt. But yeah, any simple game. So even paper prototypes are something that we value here at AIE as well. So we want to see any kind of games that you've made. But yeah, that's about all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much once again, Myles, and thank you, Matt. Whenever you want to come back as well. Oh, there you are. For joining us as well. Really awesome that we get to feature one of our awesome teachers here at AIE and let him share some of his experience, and also tell you guys a little bit about what's it like to study here at AIE as well. So before we just quickly wrap up, Matt, did you want to tell everyone about some exciting events that we have coming up next?
Yeah, absolutely. So in November, we've also got a few, I'll just whip them up on screen here, events and workshops coming up. So guys, for information, head to our website. On here we've got events and we've got workshops. So events coming up in November, we do have our open day, our final open day for the year. Melbourne and online will be giving the open day through an online format presentation. Adelaide, Sydney will be doing ours in person. So make sure to book in, come see it. I'm sure that it's going to be a really fun day. And for students who are thinking about enrolling for next year's course, the open day can definitely be that little extra kick in terms of, yep, this is the right pathway for me, loving it. So head to our open days, head to our website to register for those. And coming up as well on our website, if you go to workshops, so showcase workshops, we keep all of our live stream information on here as well. So we will be having one before December 1st. I'm going to be speaking with a team here from the Adelaide AIE campus and checking in on their work and talking to them about their experience through AIE this year. So be sure to check that one out. The information will be up soon. But other than that, there's a lot of resources on the website, guys. Feel free, jump on there, and don't be afraid to get in touch with our team. That's what we're here for, to speak with students. Any questions? I always say one of the biggest beliefs I have is there's no such thing as a stupid question. If so, I've personally asked all of them. So I'm sure that everyone here is friendly.
Me too.
Yeah, everyone is friendly. We're not going to get angry at you, but we are here to help you. So, and if it can help you find the right pathway for you and career opportunity for you, then even better. So that's everything I have on my end, Sel. But a big thank you to Myles and a big thank you to you as well, Sel. But after tonight, hopefully everyone's just seen a little glimpse as to how awesome our teachers are at AIE here. So if Myles can't convince you to come, then I don't know what else. We're out of ideas.
Yeah, definitely come. I'll teach you the way.
Awesome. And if you're lucky, he can teach you to lucid dream too. But that's
it.
that's not part of the curriculum.
I think Matt would want to learn.
Yeah,
that's not part of the curriculum. It's okay though.
I'll be your first student. Yeah. Awesome. That's all from me, guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Myles, do you have any last words before we head off?
No, I think that's it. I think I think it's if you really have any passion, if you love games in any way, then I think you should definitely consider coming here, learning how it's all done. Really, if it's really focused 9 to 5, it's really gives you that kind of. It really shows you what it's like to be in the industry, and that's really one of the biggest things I got out of it. Doing it 10 years ago when I was studying here, and I'm still doing it, and I still, and even today, the things that I learned back then, I'm still using now. So with my indie game, I'm coding all of it, and so all of those things that I learned back then, I'm still using it. It's all relevant now. So
perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
Yes, see you next week.